Hey, Pop, you got a second? The voice, sharp and laced with the kind of casual arrogance only found in the young and confident, cut through the low hum of the naval base hallway. Walter Greene didn't look up. At 78, he had learned the value of choosing his battles, and a young sailor trying to get a rise out of the janitor didn't even register as a fight worth having. The worn head of his mop continued its rhythmic journey across the polished floor, leaving a dark, clean path in its wake. Petty Officer Tyler Brooks smirked at his two friends who leaned against the wall with identical expressions of bored superiority. "I'm talking to you, old-timer." He took a step forward, planting his polished black boot directly in the path of Walter's next swipe. The mop stopped an inch from the leather. "We were just talking about call signs," Brooks said, his voice loud enough to draw glances from people walking by. "You know, the cool names they give you in the Navy. I'm Viper. This here is Hammer." He jabbed a thumb at one of his buddies. "What about you? Bet you had a real killer call sign back in the day. What was it? Mop 1? Squeegee 6? His friends snickered. The sound was tiny and unpleasant in the long, sterile hallway. Walter slowly raised his head. His eyes, the color of a faded sky, held no anger, no annoyance. They were calm, observant, and gave away nothing. He simply looked at the boot, then at the young man's face. He didn't say a word. This quiet dignity seemed to make Brooks angrier than any angry reply could have. It was a language he didn't understand. In his world, you met aggression with aggression. Silence was weakness. He saw the old man's calm as a form of disrespect, a refusal to play his game. "What's wrong, old man? Cat got your tongue?" Brooks pushed. The hallway, a main route leading to the Command Information Center, was getting busier. The shift change was approaching, and a small audience of sailors, both junior and senior, was beginning to form. Some watched with amusement, others with a flicker of disapproval. But no one stepped in. It was just Brooks, a known hothead, puffing his chest out at a civilian worker. It wasn't their problem. Brooks felt the eyes on him, and it fueled his performance. He wasn't just mocking an old man now. He was asserting his place in the hierarchy. He was the uniformed warrior. This man was just the help. "I asked you a question. In my Navy, we answer questions." He gestured around the hallway, at the sealed doors with their warning signs, at the hum of powerful electronics that could be felt through the soles of their shoes. "This is a secure area. We need to know who is in our house. Let me see your clearance." The demand hung in the air, a clear escalation. This was no longer just verbal sparring. Brooks was now using his authority, however minor it might be. Walter Greene let out a sigh so soft it was barely audible. It was the sigh of a man who had hoped for a quiet afternoon, but had been given something else entirely. With slow, deliberate movements that spoke of aching joints and a lifetime of patience, he set the mop handle against the wall. He reached into the back pocket of his simple gray work pants and pulled out a worn leather wallet, the kind that folds in three and is held together more by memory than by its stitching. He carefully pulled out a laminated ID card and held it out. Brooks didn't take it. He stared at it, forcing Walter to hold it up for inspection. The crowd grew, the silence deepening as the small drama unfolded. Brooks leaned in, making a show of reading the card. "Walter Greene, contractor, custodial services." He looked up, a triumphant smirk spreading across his face. "See? Just the janitor. Now about that call sign." "Leave it, Brooks," one of his friends muttered, sensing the mood in the hallway had shifted from amusement to discomfort. But Brooks was too far in. He felt he had to win. He saw the small, tarnished metal pin on the collar of Walter's work jacket. It was a tiny, intricately detailed dragon, so faded it was barely recognizable. He reached out and flicked it with his fingernail. "What's this little thing? Your kids get you that from a vending machine?" The moment his finger touched the pin, something shifted in Walter's eyes. The calm, placid surface of his gaze rippled. For a fraction of a second, the fluorescent lights of the hallway seemed to dim, replaced by strobing, chaotic green light. The low hum of the computer rooms was drowned out by the phantom thumping of helicopter rotor blades, the percussive beat of a machine gun, and a young man's desperate voice crackling with static. "Dragon 6, this is Eagle 2. We are down. I repeat, we are down. They're all around us." The smell of jet fuel and wet, rotting jungle filled his senses. Then, just as quickly as it came, it was gone. He was back in the hallway, staring at the arrogant face of Petty Officer Brooks. The entire sensory memory, the flash echo of a life lived decades ago, had lasted less than a heartbeat, but it was there, a ghost in the machine. Walter's hand, still holding the ID, was perfectly steady. He said nothing. His silence was his shield, his armor, his last line of defense, and it was driving Brooks to the edge of his self-control. "Are you deaf or just stupid?" Brooks' voice was a low snarl now. He finally snatched the ID from Walter's fingers. "You know what? I think you're a security risk, wandering around sensitive areas, not answering questions. How do we know you're not some spy pretending to be a harmless old janitor?" He waved the ID card at the onlookers. "Anybody can get one of these." From the back of the small crowd, Chief Petty Officer Davis watched, his face a grim mask. He was a man of 30 years in the service, and his instincts were screaming at him. He'd seen this kind of thing before, a young, arrogant sailor pushing too far, drunk on his own small measure of authority. But this was different. It wasn't the boy Brooks that worried him. It was the old man, the janitor, the terrifying absolute stillness he possessed in the face of such profound disrespect. It wasn't the calm of a man who was scared. It was the calm of a man who had seen so much worse that this barely registered. It was the calm of a mountain in a windstorm. Davis had heard stories, whispers really, that floated around for years. A legend about a quiet civilian worker on base, a man who was more than he seemed. Most dismissed it as a tall tale. But looking at Walter Greene, at the set of his jaw and the unnerving steadiness of his gaze, Davis felt a cold dread snake its way up his spine. He saw Brooks puffing up for his final decisive act of humiliation and knew he had to act. He didn't push through the crowd. He didn't shout at Brooks. That would only make it worse, a public confrontation between a chief and a petty officer. Instead, he slipped back, melting into a side quarter and pulling out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly as he scrolled through his contacts. He didn't call base security. He didn't call his division officer. He went straight to the top. He found the number for the office of the Fleet Master Chief. The phone was answered on the second ring by a young aide. "Master Chief's office." "This is Chief Davis," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need to speak with Master Chief Thompson. It's an emergency." "He's preparing for the Admiral's brief, Chief. Can it wait?" "No," Davis said, the word coming out like a gunshot. "It cannot wait. I'm in the hallway outside the command center. We have a code of conduct violation in progress. A serious one." He could hear the aide's sigh on the other end. This was probably going to be a career-limiting phone call. "There's a petty officer named Brooks, and he is publicly harassing a civilian contractor." "A contractor?" the aide asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "Chief, is this really—" "His name," Davis cut in, "is Walter Greene." He let the name hang in the air. "Brooks he's demanding to know his call sign. Master Chief, you need to get down here, or you need to call the Admiral." I think this is about to become the worst day of that young petty officer's life. There was a sudden, sharp silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that means someone has just dropped a pen and frozen mid-motion. Davis could almost hear the gears turning, the name Walter Greene being processed through decades of naval lore and classified history. "Stay right there, Chief." The aide's voice was different now, tight, strained. "Don't let that situation escalate further. Help is on the way." The line went dead. Davis pocketed his phone and turned back toward the main hallway, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He had a feeling he was about to witness something he would tell his grandchildren about. The phone call landed on the desk of Fleet Master Chief Thompson like a grenade with the pin pulled. His aide, a young sailor with wide, panicked eyes, relayed Chief Davis's message in a halting whisper. The Master Chief, a man built like a seawall and weathered by decades of service, listened without expression. But when the aide said the name Walter Greene, Thompson went rigid. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. He placed it down on his desk with a deliberate, audible click. "Say that name again, son," Thompson said, his voice a low rumble. "Walter Greene, Master Chief. A custodian." Thompson rose from his chair. He was not a man who moved quickly, but now he moved with a terrifying sense of purpose. He strode to a large locked filing cabinet in the corner of his office, one reserved for old service records and sensitive personnel files. He spun the combination lock with practiced speed. He pulled open a drawer marked G, and his thick fingers rifled through the files. He pulled one out. It was thin, almost empty, and most of the pages inside were covered in thick black lines of censorship. But one line on the very first page was clear. It read, Project Designation, Dragon's Tooth, Command Authority, Dragon 6. The Master Chief closed the file and looked at his aide, his face pale. Get Admiral Bennett on the line. Use the secure channel. Tell him we have a Dragon 6 situation at the command center. He'll know what that means. The aide, now understanding he was in the middle of something far above his pay grade, scrambled to comply. Thompson then keyed the intercom on his desk. Security, I want a full Marine Corps honor guard, dress uniforms, rifles to my position, double time, and get the base commander. Tell him to meet me at the east entrance of the building, 5 minutes ago. He clicked off the intercom and grabbed his cover from its stand. My God, he whispered to the empty room. He's been here all this time, just mopping floors. Back in the hallway, Petty Officer Brooks was completely unaware of the storm that was about to break over his head. All he knew was that the old man's silence was a challenge he had to break. He saw the unease in the crowd, the disapproving glares from the senior sailors, and he misinterpreted it. He thought they were waiting for him to finish it, to assert the authority of the uniform. He took a step closer to Walter, his voice dropping to a theatrical, threatening tone. That's it, old man. I'm done playing games. He grabbed Walter's thin arm, his fingers digging into the frail muscle. The crowd gasped collectively. A line had been physically crossed. You're a security risk. Your story doesn't add up. You're coming with me to see the Master at Arms. We're going to put you in a little room and ask you some questions until you decide to talk. He started to pull Walter forward, but the old man was an anchor, unmoving. And after that, Brooks sneered, pushing his face close to Walter's, we'll get you a nice little psychological evaluation. Maybe you're confused. Maybe you've forgotten who you are. We can help you with that. It was the ultimate overreach. He wasn't just insulting a janitor. He was threatening to strip a man of his dignity, his freedom, and his sanity. He had passed the point of no return. And at that exact moment, a new sound intruded upon the scene. It started as a faint, rhythmic beat from the far end of the long hallway, a sound that was utterly out of place in the quiet, climate-controlled world of the naval base. It was the sound of precise military footsteps, many of them moving in perfect unison. Clap, clap, clap. The sound grew louder, more powerful, echoing off the floor and steel walls. Every head in the hallway turned toward the sound. Brooks froze, his hand still clamped on Walter's arm. His arrogant smirk faltered, replaced by a look of pure confusion. The glass doors at the end of the hall swung open, and the source of the sound emerged. First came the base commander, a captain with silver eagles on his collar, his face set like granite. At his side was the Fleet Master Chief, his expression one of cold fury. And behind them, moving with fluid, intimidating grace that only they possess, was a group of 8 United States Marines in full-dress blues. Their white hats were immaculate. Their rifles were held at perfect attention. Their polished shoes hit the floor in a single thunderous report with every step. The spectacle was so sudden, so overwhelming, that the crowd simply melted away, pressing themselves against the walls as if to avoid being touched by the sheer gravity of the procession. They moved with a purpose that sucked all the air out of the hallway. They were not walking, they were advancing, and their destination was the small, ugly scene being made by a petty officer and a janitor. The procession stopped 3 feet from Walter Greene. Petty Officer Brooks looked from the captain to the Master Chief to the stone-faced Marines, his mind unable to process what was happening. His grip on Walter's arm went slack. The base commander, a man who commanded thousands of sailors and oversaw $1 billion worth of naval assets, ignored Brooks as if he were a piece of furniture. His eyes were fixed solely on the old janitor. He drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight. In the ringing silence of the hallway, he brought his right hand up in a salute so sharp, so precise, it could have cut glass. He held it there, his gaze locked with Walter's. "Mr. Greene," the commander's voice boomed, powerful and laden with a respect that bordered on reverence. "It is an honor, sir." Brooks's jaw dropped. The rest of the crowd looked on in stunned disbelief. The base commander was saluting the janitor. The fleet master chief and all 8 Marines followed suit, their movements a single, unified gesture of supreme respect. The commander did not lower his salute. He held it, a public testament to the man standing before him. It was the master chief who stepped forward to address the dumbfounded crowd. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of history. "For those of you who are confused," he began, his eyes scanning the faces of every sailor in the hall, "for the benefit of those who do not know who this man is, I suggest you listen very closely. You are standing in the presence of the man once known by the call sign Dragon 6. A wave of murmurs and gasps rippled through the crowd. The name was a phantom, a whisper from a forgotten war, a legend told in hushed tones by old-timers. Most thought it was just a story. "Mr. Greene," the Master Chief continued, his voice rising with pride, "was the commander of a secret unit designated Dragon's Tooth during the Vietnam War. He served 5 tours of duty, operating deep behind enemy lines. Official records, the few that aren't still classified, credit him with the direct rescue of 87 downed American pilots and Special Forces operators." With each word, Petty Officer Brooks seemed to shrink. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. The sailors who had been snickering with him just minutes before now looked at the floor in profound shame. For his actions, the Master Chief's voice resonated with authority. He was awarded the Navy Cross twice, the Silver Star 4 times, the Bronze Star for Valor 3 times, and a Medal of Honor, the citation for which remains classified to this very day. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. This man, this janitor, has more courage and has shown more honor in any given week of his service than most of us will see in a lifetime. He has earned the right to live his life in peace and quiet. He is owed nothing less than our absolute, unwavering respect. The commander finally lowered his salute. He turned his gaze, cold as the North Atlantic, onto Petty Officer Brooks. The young man flinched as if he had been physically struck. "Petty Officer," the commander's voice was dangerously low, a quiet storm of controlled rage. "You stand here wearing a uniform that this man has honored with his blood, and you dare to lay a hand on him? You dare to question his character?" He didn't wait for an answer. He motioned to the Master Chief. "Take this sailor to my office. His naval career has just taken a very sharp and unpleasant turn. He and I are going to have a very long conversation about the core values of the United States Navy." 2 of the Marines broke formation and flanked Brooks, their presence immense and intimidating. They escorted him away, a broken and humiliated young man who had just learned the most brutal lesson of his life. The commander then turned back to Walter, his expression softening. "Sir, on behalf of my entire command, I offer you our most sincere apology." For the first time, Walter Greene spoke. His voice was quiet, a little raspy, but it carried through the silent hall. "No need, Captain," he said, giving a small, weary nod. "He's just a boy. The young ones, they're loud. They think the world needs to hear them. They don't know yet that the things that matter are quiet." He looked around at the faces of the young sailors watching him, their expressions a mixture of awe and shame. "Honor," Walter said, tapping his own chest with a gnarled finger right over the little dragon pin. "It's not something you wear on your sleeve for everyone to see. It's something you carry in here. Just teach them to look a little closer, to see the person, not the job they do." As he tapped the pin, another image bloomed in his mind, this one clear and warm. A jungle clearing, steam rising from the damp earth. A much younger Walter covered in mud and grime, kneeling beside a wounded pilot. The pilot, his face etched with pain and gratitude, presses a small hand-carved piece of metal into Walter's palm. It's a tiny dragon. "They call you Dragon 6, the pilot rasped, a grin splitting his face. "Figured you ought to have one to make it official." It was a gift, a symbol of a life saved, of a debt that could never truly be repaid, carried quietly on a janitor's collar for 50 years. The incident on the naval base became the stuff of instant legend. The story of the captain and the janitor spread from ship to ship, from station to station. The base commander was true to his word. Petty Officer Brooks was not discharged, but he was demoted to the lowest possible rank and reassigned to a unit tasked with the most menial, humbling jobs the Navy had to offer. More importantly, the commander instituted a new mandatory training program for every sailor on the base. It was a history and heritage lesson focusing on the quiet contributions of veterans and the idea that heroes often wore the most unassuming disguises. Unofficially, everyone on base called it the Dragon 6 Protocol. Weeks passed. The autumn air grew crisp. One afternoon, the now seaman apprentice Tyler Brooks was on his hands and knees scrubbing the floor of a barracks bathroom. The work was hard, the smell was bad, and it gave him a lot of time to think. He heard the familiar, rhythmic squeak of a mop bucket's wheels and looked up. Walter Greene stood in the doorway, ready to start his own shift. The two men looked at each other for a long moment. The air was thick with unspoken words. Brooks slowly got to his feet, his face flushed with a shame that was still raw. "Mr. Greene," he said, his voice barely a whisper, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry." Walter looked at him, his gaze as steady as ever. He surveyed the work Brooks had been doing, the half-scrubbed floor, the bucket of dirty water. He simply nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement. "A job's a job, son," he said, his voice gentle. "You do it with pride, or you don't do it at all." He then allowed a very small, almost imperceptible smile to touch his lips. He pointed with his chin toward a corner Brooks had not yet reached. "You missed a spot." It was not a taunt. It was not mockery. It was a simple statement of fact, a quiet offering of a practical lesson from one working man to another. It was a moment of grace. Brooks looked at the spot, then back at Walter, and nodded. He picked up his brush and, without another word, got back to work. Walter Greene watched him for a second longer before turning and continuing on his rounds. A quiet hero walking the halls he had sworn a lifetime ago to protect. Walter Greene's story is a powerful reminder that heroes walk among us every day, often in the quietest of roles.